What is going on, guys? Craig1287 here. I'm bringing you yet another VR Essays video. This is episode 3. If you haven't seen episodes 1 or 2, I'll leave the link to those in the video description. But first one, we talked about video game literacy specifically to VR. In episode 2, talked about motion sickness and what kind of games does it have, does it affect, what kind of gamers is it going to affect. And now, episode 3. So I've actually filmed these back to back, and my natural lighting source in my window is actually kind of dying down, so hopefully this one isn't as long as the others, but I'm also getting a little bit of dry mouth from all the talking, but hopefully I can handle this. So in this episode, I want to talk about something. This is actually the main thing that I wanted to talk about for these VR essays that I've been doing for the longest time, because it's one of the first things that came to my mind. Now, in traditional video games that we've had for a few years now, you have, well, obviously we have different genres. You've got RPGs, you've got shooters, you have now MOBAs, real-time strategy games, fighting games, platformers. You have these genres, and then you have the subgenres within them. For RPGs, you have, is it like a first-person RPG like the Elder Scrolls series? Is it a third-person RPG? Is it an isometric RPG? Is it a turn-based? Is it real-time? All these different kind of things that come into play. For shooters, you've got first-person shooter, third-person shooter. Is it a cover shooter? Is it a tactical shooter? And then you have like time kind of. Is it sci-fi? Is it fantasy? Is it medieval? Is it what this that? Is it all these different, so many different subcategories. Now for VR, I feel like some of this stuff is not going to be applicable to these kind of classifications. In a very gameplay specific, not just can we do fantasy anymore? Oh no, what are we gonna do? Oh, sci-fi. Can we? No, I'm not talking like that. But and this is specifically for shooters. Now, I don't think third-person shooters are going to be a thing for VR. People are going to experiment, and we may still have them here and there. Things like Edge of Darkness, not Edge, Edge of Nowhere, a third-person game for the Oculus Rift. And so I think that's going to be, or that kind of stuff is still going to be around, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as common as we have now. And even now, most shooters are first-person shooters. It just kind of makes sense to have it from first person, and it fits the mouse and the analog stick. It just feels kind of natural. But in VR, I think that not only are third-person shooters going to further be reduced, but more than that, first-person shooters, you still have different types of first-person shooters. A lot of people, you've got kind of a different spectrum, I guess. If you want to put it on a line, you've got your tactical, slower-paced, very realistic or authentic shooters, and then you've got arcadey kind of shooters. Your tactical ones are going to be recently things like Arma, Rainbow Six Siege, things like that. And then on the complete other end of the really arcadey stuff, you've got things like Halo, Call of Duty, and things like Unreal Tournament and Quake. Now, even then, those are very different from each other. I'm sure I got, if this video were to ever go big, with my channel, I doubt it, but I'm sure that there would be so many comments in here, you just put Call of Duty in the same bunch with Quake. Nah, I'm just saying, let me continue. I'll keep talking. I mean, Quake 3 is one of my favorite multiplayer shooters of all time. So, but in terms of just them being not so realistic, like Call of Duty at least has like things like aim down sight. You can't have like more than a few weapons on you at a time. But things like Quake, Unreal Tournament, you could have multiple weapons and you just pick them up and there's no reloading. There's some arcadey elements. I'm not saying that they don't require skill. You can have games on both spectrums that require an immense amount of skill. There's so much skill involved with Arma. There's so much skill involved with Counter-Strike and Quake and Unreal, even though those games don't really have aim down sight except for a few specific guns. So, but they're more of twitch and speed and things like that. Whereas Arma and Rainbow Six, they're more slow pace. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, is it's the pacing that makes them different. And it's the way that they do the damage models. Obviously, that plays a very key role. If you can die to one shot to the head, like in Siege, or just 2 shots to the chest in other tactical kind of shooters, versus something like Halo or Call of Duty, where you can take multiple hits and then you just gotta not take any damage for a little bit and then you heal up. That changes their pacing. It's very distinct gameplay design choices that the developers made to create the pacing the way it is. Map design can also can change the pacing. Gameplay mechanics. There's so many different things that can affect the pacing of a game. But there's just some shooters that have a chunky feel to them. Siege kind of has a chunky feel. Arma has a chunky feel. It's mostly the way with the movement is done. One game that I think of probably the most when I think of chunky movement is something like the Killzone games. So if you don't play on any PlayStation consoles, you probably have never experienced the Killzone games, but they feel slow and chunky. You can crank up the aim sensitivity on it, but it's still, there's something about the movement in it that just feels chunky and slow, almost like you're in tree sap or molasses or something, and just the way that your movement is done, it just has a slower feel to it. And so then you got something like Unreal Tournament, where it's really, really fast movement. You're skiing, you're rocket jumping yourself from different levels. You've got the teleports where you're instantly going around the map in crazy ways. You've got this different sense of speed, and you have this snap aim, and the games have very different feels to them. Well, how is that going to work in VR is kind of what I've been thinking to myself as I've been playing a lot of these shooters. And then to another degree, how's cover? Right now, a lot of people describe, Gears of War, it's a cover shooter. Uncharted, it's kind of a cover shooter. You got to take cover a lot. Even Mass Effect has cover. There's the new Mass Effect coming out, Mass Effect Andromeda, and you've got to take cover in that. If you just go running out there and go guns blazing, you're probably going to get shot really, really quick. Stealth games, you've got things like Dishonored or Thief, Sniper Elite, where you need to use cover if you're going to be actually engaging in combat, but you kind of want to take enemies out without ever really getting into return combat. You want to take them out stealthily, but there's still cover. You want to keep line of sight and things like that. So in those games, you typically have a button that you hit, like in Gears on the Xbox controllers, A. You hit that A and you take cover. On PC, on mouse and keyboard, when you're playing Gears, that's spacebar. And a lot of things will use that, like Mass Effect, it does like spacebar and whatnot. And so you describe something as, that's a cover-based shooter. It could even be a first-person cover-based shooter. Killzone, to reference again, had a built-in cover system. Battlefield has also added in cover to where you can actually do the lean when your gun is aiming at the edge of an object and you hit aim down sight. You'll kind of do a lean. Rainbow Six Siege is a first-person shooter, and it's got a lot of cover aspects to it. You actually can manually do the lean in that, but people don't really call it a cover shooter. It's more people describe it as a tactical shooter, but you still use a lot of cover. You're creating those murder holes is what a lot of people call them, and you're using that murder hole as visual cover. It's not going to protect you from return fire, but there's still a lot of shield emplacements that you can put down to provide for cover and things like that. So it's kind of a cover shooter, just first person. It just doesn't have an attached to cover like you do in Gears. So how are things like Gears of War a cover-based shooter in which you have a specific button on your control method to like suction yourself to cover? Is that going to work in VR? I mean, obviously you don't really need to because you just physically are ducking behind cover, so that's not going to happen. But for VR, is in the future when developers are creating their shooters, when they're creating their games, can they, for VR, now say, I want to make a cover shooter. I want to make this style shooter. Because it's not really up to them and the mechanics now. They can still affect things like map design, bullet damage, how do you heal, things like that can still impact the pacing of something. But if I want to play Onward like it's a Twitch shooter, which I don't typically think of it, again, the pacing, the movement of it is very slow. But if I want to just do snap aiming and just take that guy out, take that guy out, take that guy out, take that guy out, take that guy out. If I want to, jump and shoot a rocket and stuff like that, and I want to play it like Unreal Tournament or Quake, there's not so much that the developer can do to stop me from playing it like that. Again, the way that the recoil, bullet spread, things like that work. Having to have your second hand go onto the gun and brace it for you, things like that. But like aiming down sight, is that something? How are developers going to handle AD? Like right now in Battlefield and a lot of other shooters, Call of Duty, you have different stats for the accuracy of a gun because you have the ADS accuracy, but then you have the hipfire spread. And your gun actually gets, when I hit left trigger or right mouse click and I aim down sight, the spread of the gun now has an actual, in the game's data, the values that are in the code of the game, it actually has a statistical change. You still have to worry about recoil, and if you shoot too long, bullet spread might get too crazy. But there's like an actual statistical change in the way that the gun performs in the game when you aim down sight. But in VR, is that going to be programmed in? Like, is the game going to know that when I hold it close to this field, when I hold it up close to my eye, is there going to be this statistical change in the bullet spread of the gun? Or is the gun always going to aim if I'm holding it here at this angle? Is the bullets going to perform just like a gun would in real life? If I were to take a real gun and just do this, I mean, obviously I don't have it resting into my shoulder, so recoil is going to be a thing, but the bullet spread, how much the bullets deviate as they come out of the barrel, are not going to change if I'm doing the gun from here versus this. I mean, as long as there's something stopping that recoil of the gun, if I have it going into my arm right here and it's doing the bullets are going to come out of the barrel the same way. How is that going to translate for shooters now? I'm just curious. How are developers going to handle this? Are shooters now the type of shooter? It's now so much more in us, in our control. If I want to play this like that, if I don't want to ever aim down sight, then I'm playing it just like in Counter-Strike, where there's only a few weapons with scopes on them that you actually scope with that gun. You can still hip fire them, but no scoping, a hip fire. I might just want to play Onward like that, and I might be really darn good at it if I throw a laser sight on it. In most shooters, when they give you a chance to put a laser sight on your gun as an attachment versus something else, I'm typically going to go with the laser sight because it's just so helpful in VR. A specific example I can think of just off the top of my head, Space Pirate Trainer, very arcade shooter, but I find my main weapon in it is the one where it shoots a physical hit scan bullet. And this hit scan is part of what helps make it easiest to hit. Its damage value is very low because of this, but it's mostly the lasers that you get on it. No other gun, when you're playing Space Pirate Trainer, when you're shooting, you get that laser. In the Brookhaven experiment, when I'm playing that, the second I unlock it in either survival mode or the campaign, I put that laser on my gun. Because even though it is really easy to aim down sight, and I find myself doing this to help steady my hand and whatnot, it's still just so easy to just kind of aim, when you're holding the gun down just like this, and to just wait for that laser dot to end up on the enemy's head, and you pop it and you get headshots, and it's just so easy. So, all these kind of things that I'm thinking of. How are developers going to make the game that they want to make? If they want to make it a tactical military shooter with realistic this and realistic recoil, and in Onward you actually can crouch and your character will crouch in game, and then you can go prone and your character will actually go prone in game. Are those going to have statistical changes on the recoil that you have on your gun? When you grip the gun, is it going to actually have you grip the gun like you would in real life, where a foregrip is? In shooters now, like Rainbow Six, you just equip the foregrip, and it gives you reduced recoil. In Battlefield, you equip a foregrip, and it gives you that reduced recoil, or that tighter spread, or that faster aim down sight time. But now, my aim down sight time is totally bound by my abilities to do this. and then to actually hold the gun at the right way that my vision lines up through the magnifying lenses of a scope. And you know, all these different things. Reload speed is now bound by your ability to reload in so many of these shooters. Yeah, you can just lower the gun and it reloads for you, but in something like Onward or Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades, or Raw Data, where you actually have to manually do these reloads, the gear that you put on your gun doesn't have... It's not just a statistical change, it's a practical change. Now I actually, because I've got this foregrip, I actually can grip it on my gun. If you want dual magazines, you know, in a RPG style shooter, if you get dual mags, you know, it reduces your reload speed from 3.2 seconds to 2.75 seconds, and it just is that every single time. But now, if I put on the dual mags, like, yeah, it might actually be able to help me reload faster because I just grab it, turn it, put it back in, and yeah, but it's not going to be the exact same reload time every single time. Your bolt, your ability to do a bolt in Battlefield games, you can put on the I don't ever snipe, so I can't remember the name of it. Straight pull bolt, I think is what it is, and that's what lets you aim down sight, fire, and do the reload, and you don't have to unscope to reload. And I think it also speeds up your reload time, but like that's something that happens in Battlefield. It has statistical changes, it has some gameplay changes in how your reloading is done, but it's still the same every single time. Now, what's a straight pull bolt gonna do for a VR shooter? I don't know. Well, how is a developer going to do this kind of stuff? So this is just something that if you're not in the VR scene and you haven't really experienced these games and you haven't really had the chance to realize how different shooters really are, like there have been times, one of the earliest experiences I did in VR was Hover Junkers, which is a game where you're on a hovercraft and you have your guns and you switch to them by doing the track wheel rather than like grabbing the guns off you just use your trackpad to select a gun, and you can dual wield and whatnot. So like reloading those, you actually did have to do some sense of like mechanics to it, but there were times when I was just getting so, guy would fly his hovercraft up next to me and I'd start getting shot at and I'm like having to take cover, and so much of my concentration now is focused on keeping myself in cover and things like that, and then I would go to shoot and I would realize, oh crap, I totally forgot to reload, and then I'm sitting there trying to do the reload mechanics, I'm going through the stuff, and while trying to do that, while taking all this fire, like I wasn't able to reload as fast as I was in just the training, the training ground, the fire range, or whatever it was called, where they're just targets that are not returning fire. You know, it's a very calm thing. The recent John Wick game, I played the John Wick Chronicles game for VR, and in the tutorial kind of training level, you know, I was doing everything real easy. I was getting like 95% of my shots were, you know, headshot, and when it has you shoot out their feet and then you can shoot their head, you know, I was doing incredibly well. And then you go into the actual levels where the enemies are now moving, returning fire on you. There's just so many things that you're having to split your concentration on, and I found myself not doing nearly as well as I was in the training, the little training aspect. And so, you know, these are the kind of things that I feel like developers are, obviously they're already thinking about them, but you know, it's just stuff that we as gamers got to start thinking about as well. But I mean, developers, I can't imagine what it's like now. If you wanted to make if you're Gears of War developer, Epic, if you're Epic Games, and now VR has caught on, and your next Gears game obviously has to be a VR game because that's where the industry has moved. Is it gonna work? Can you make Gears VR? I don't know. I'm trying to think of other kind of games that work like that. I mean, are all RPGs going to be first person? From here on, it's kind of weird. You know, I just thinking about these things is just interesting things, and I guess that's why it's part of my VR essays series of episodes. So yeah. I'm getting spammed with Steam invites on my computer right now, so that's why my train of thought is going all over the place. But yeah, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of episode 3 of VR Essays, and I think this is about all I'll make for right now. So far I filmed these first 3 back to back, but yeah, I think if you've got any ideas for future episodes that you would like to see, things that you would like me to give some input on, and things that just the kind of things that I can't put into just a simple paragraph response on YouTube. You know, something that really takes a lot of thought about. So definitely let me know if you guys have any ideas or things that you just want me to discuss about, think about, do some research on, and then I'll get another VR essays video on. So yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed this. Hope you stuck through to the end of the video and have enjoyed it. So hope you guys have enjoyed all of these episodes so far. Have a good one. Ta-ta.